Clara Vance walked into the glass ballroom of the Zenith Hotel at the exact moment her former husband placed a hand around another woman's waist and told the press that Clara had never contributed anything to V-Next. Outside, snow lashed against the windows of the 80th floor. Inside, cold light slid across expensive evening gowns and smiles rehearsed in front of mirrors. Julian Vance stood at the center of the stage in a fitted black suit, his face glowing as though the entire city of Chicago existed only to serve as his backdrop. Sasha stood close beside Julian. Her red dress made her impossible to miss in the crowd, and the hand resting on his arm deliberately stayed there whenever a camera turned toward them. Everyone understood that the place beside the chief executive of V-Next now belonged to someone new. Clara wore a gray wool coat, worn thin around the cuffs. No diamonds. No assistant. No escort. The security guard checked his tablet, then frowned. "Your name is not on the guest list." Julian saw her. His gaze paused for a moment, sharpened by irritation. He stepped down from the stage, still wearing the smile he had prepared for the cameras. "What are you doing here?" Clara looked directly at him. "I received an invitation from the organizers." Julian laughed. "That invitation became worthless this morning. Your name has also been removed from the list of founding shareholders. Do not embarrass me in front of the investment funds." Sasha looked at Clara's coat. "She already has." A few people laughed. A photographer raised his camera, waiting for tears or a desperate plea. Clara simply accepted a glass of water and stepped aside. For 10 years, Clara had stayed awake through entire nights, correcting designs Julian could not understand. She had sold her mother's apartment to save the company's first cash flow crisis. She had signed guarantees that never carried her name in the official reports. Julian called her quiet sacrifice the duty of a wife. Whenever V-Next appeared on television, he described her silence as incompetence. At that exact moment, a sharp crash rang out near the main table. Lucas, the new intern, stood frozen. The tray in his hands tilted, sending dark red wine across Sasha's white shoes. Her expression changed instantly. "Do you have any idea how much these shoes cost?" Lucas stammered an apology. Sasha pointed toward the floor. "Get on your knees. Clean them." The air around them turned rigid. Julian looked at Lucas as though he were a broken object. "Do as she says. Then clear out your desk. V-Next has no use for someone that clumsy." Lucas lowered his head. His hands shook so badly that he could not pick up the cloth near his feet. Clara stepped forward. "He will not kneel." Sasha spun around. "This has nothing to do with you." Clara pulled a white handkerchief from her coat pocket, placed it in Lucas's hand, then looked directly at Julian. "A company does not collapse because of one spilled glass of wine. It collapses when its leaders mistake cruelty for power." Julian clenched his jaw. Sasha's face flushed red. Lucas remained still, unable to believe that anyone had dared to say those words in front of hundreds of guests. At the far end of the ballroom, a silver-haired man in a simple suit slowly set down his glass. No one recognized Arthur Pendleton. No one knew that he held the power to decide the fate of the award that night. Arthur looked at the handkerchief in Lucas's hand, then at Clara. He had come to find a company worthy of his investment. Instead, he had just found the unseen helper who had quietly built an empire. Applause rose as Julian Vance returned to the stage, but behind his smile, anger tightened every muscle in his face. Julian had spent 3 months preparing for this moment. His speech was already loaded into the teleprompter. Every story about courage, vision, and innovation had been written by Sasha's media team to turn him into the hero of the clean energy industry. If V-Next won the Global Innovation Award, the corporation would receive a $100 million support package from the government and Crown Union. More importantly, the banks would stop asking questions about the debts that were about to come due. Julian glanced toward the front row. Clara was still standing beside Lucas, calm as though the humiliation she had just endured had never happened. He hated that calmness. Sasha moved closer to the stage and leaned toward Julian's ear. "Do not let her ruin tonight. Once you accept the award, everyone will forget who she is." Julian nodded. That was what he had believed for years. The host appeared beneath a circle of white light. After a brief introduction, she announced that Crown Union would present previously unreleased footage revealing the person who had created the core foundation of the next generation solar battery project. Julian lifted his chin slightly. This was the segment Sasha had prepared for him. The enormous screen behind the stage went dark. Julian waited for the V-Next logo to appear, but the logo never appeared. Instead, the screen showed an old laboratory with peeling walls, electrical cables running across the floor, and a computer with a cracked corner on its monitor. The date displayed in the video showed that the footage had been recorded 7 years earlier. A woman sat hunched over a desk. It was Clara. Her hair had been tied back in a hurry. Red cracks covered her fingertips from working continuously in the cold. Beside her were only cold coffee, burned circuit boards, and a notebook packed with formulas. In the footage, a younger Julian entered the room and threw a folder onto the desk. "The investors have given us 3 days. If the algorithm does not work, everything is over." Clara did not look up. "I need more time to test the safety systems." "We do not have more time. Just make it work first." The footage sped forward. Clara stayed awake through night after night. She corrected every line of code, redesigned the power distribution structure, and built a system that allowed the batteries to maintain performance in regions with extremely high temperatures. At one point, a shard of broken glass cut her fingertip, but she simply wrapped it in a bandage and continued typing. No one in the ballroom spoke. The video continued with images of villages across South Asia, where millions of households received stable electricity at an affordable price for the first time. Legal documents appeared on the screen. Clara had refused personal royalty payments so that energy costs would not be driven higher. Julian stood motionless. He knew those documents existed. He simply had not known that someone had preserved every piece of evidence. Sasha took one step backward. She looked around, searching for a technician she could signal to shut down the screen, but no one responded. The video ended with a handwritten sentence from Clara's notebook. "If this technology only makes the rich richer, then it has failed." The stage lights came back on. Arthur Pendleton stepped out of the crowd. 2 members of Crown Union now walked behind him. The entire room immediately recognized the man they had mistaken for an ordinary guest only minutes earlier. Arthur accepted the microphone from the host. Julian struggled to regain control of his voice. "Mr. Pendleton, there must be some misunderstanding. Clara participated during the early phase, but V-Next developed this technology under my leadership." Arthur looked directly at him. "Participated?" He raised a folder. 73% of the current algorithmic structure was taken directly from Clara's original design. Her signature was removed from the patent records 3 weeks before the public announcement. "You were the person who signed the order authorizing that change." Whispers erupted across the ballroom. Julian turned toward Clara. For the first time that night, genuine fear appeared in his eyes. Arthur continued, "A man who steals intellectual property has no right to receive this award. The true winner is the woman who refused to accept a single dollar in royalties for 10 years, so that poor families would not be forced to pay the price for investor greed." He turned toward Clara. "Please join me on the stage." Clara set down her glass of water. She walked past the people who had mocked her worn coat. None of them dared to look at her with pity anymore. Julian watched her, his breathing growing heavier. He had always believed Clara was nothing more than an unseen helper, a woman who could be erased from history with a few signatures. But when she stood beside Arthur Pendleton beneath the lights, Julian began to understand that the true identity of this silent billionaire had not yet been revealed. And karma in business had only just knocked on the door. The moment Clara stepped onto the stage, every screen in the ballroom turned black at once. The footage of the old laboratory disappeared. The images of villages glowing with electric light vanished. All that remained was a silver shield in the center of the screen with the words Aegis Capital beneath it. Julian Vance stared at the symbol as though he were watching a bullet fly directly toward him. For years, Aegis Capital had been a name that made every chief executive in Chicago proceed with caution. The fund never appeared on television, never held press conferences, and had never publicly revealed the identity of its founder. It invested through a network of intermediary companies, purchased distressed debt, rescued businesses on the edge of bankruptcy, and then quietly took control of their entire boards of directors. Julian had often said that one day he would meet the person behind Aegis Capital. He had never imagined that person had slept beside him for nearly a decade. Arthur Pendleton placed the folder on the podium. 7 years ago, V-Next had enough money to continue operating for only 11 more days. No bank was willing to lend to the company. No investor believed in the project. At that time, Aegis Capital purchased the convertible debt and continued injecting funds through 6 different companies. Julian interrupted him. Aegis is only a creditor. I am still in control. Arthur turned to the next page. Did you read the contract carefully? Julian said nothing. Arthur looked across the ballroom. Under the conversion clause, if V-Next falsified patent records or misused public funding, the entire debt would immediately be converted into equity. As of 8 o'clock tonight, Aegis Capital owns 65% of V-Next. A sharp gasp came from the front row. Arthur turned toward Clara. And the ultimate owner of Aegis Capital is Miss Clara Vance. No one applauded. The entire room sank into the heavy silence of people who had just realized they had mocked a silent billionaire. Julian stepped away from the microphone. That is impossible. Where did you get that kind of money? Clara looked at him. Her voice was not loud, but it was clear enough for every reporter in the room to record. From the patents you said were worthless, from the investments you ridiculed, and from the projects I built every time you told me I knew nothing about business. Below the stage, Sasha's face had turned pale. She pulled out her phone and quietly backed toward a side exit. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen as she called her private attorney. Move the money out of the campaign accounts immediately. Use the offshore accounts. Do it before they freeze everything. She believed the music and the crowd would conceal the call. But Lucas was standing less than 6 feet away. He looked at Clara, then at Sasha as she hurried toward the exit. In that moment, Lucas could have remained silent to protect his job, but he remembered what it had felt like to be ordered onto his knees because of a single glass of wine. He stepped forward and blocked the door. You cannot leave yet. Sasha shoved his arm aside. Get out of my way. 2 men in dark coats appeared behind Lucas. At the same time, financial investigators entered through the main lobby. Arthur spoke calmly. The V-Next marketing accounts have been under surveillance for 4 months. More than $12 million was transferred through media companies that do not exist. Miss Sasha, the Financial Crimes Unit would like to speak with you. Sasha turned toward Julian. You said everything had been handled. Julian looked at her as though he had never known her. That was your department. I know nothing about it. Sasha let out a dry laugh. You signed every invoice. She was detained in front of dozens of cameras. The red dress that had once made Sasha stand out now made it easy for every camera to follow her every step. Julian rushed toward Clara. You cannot do this. V-Next is my company. Clara answered him. V-Next exists because I kept it alive. You only stood in front of the cameras and accepted the rewards. Arthur announced that the board had voted to suspend Julian from his position as chief executive officer. The corporate takeover was completed on the very stage Julian had prepared to honor himself. One investor after another turned away. His associates avoided his eyes. The people who had raised their glasses to congratulate Julian only minutes earlier began deleting their photographs with him from their phones. Karma in business does not arrive with thunder. It arrives through contracts, signatures, and numbers that cannot be denied. Julian looked at Clara standing beside Arthur. Only then did he understand that his entire position, the major contracts, every escape from bankruptcy, and even the empire he claimed to have built, had all been supported by Clara's hand from behind the scenes. He had betrayed the only person who had always protected him. Now, betrayal and redemption was no longer a story he could rewrite with a speech. The empire had changed hands, and Clara had not yet delivered her final judgment. When the last guests left the Zenith, Julian Vance dropped to his knees in the middle of the hallway and grabbed the wrist of the woman whose name he had once ordered removed from her own company. Beyond the glass doors, snow continued to blanket Chicago. Inside the ballroom, hotel employees were clearing away broken wine glasses, electrical cables, and signs bearing Julian's name. The stage that had been built to honor him now held nothing but a dark screen and rows of empty chairs. Clara stopped walking. Julian's hand was ice cold. His expensive suit was wrinkled. His tie hung crooked around his neck. His hair was disheveled, and his eyes were red with panic. In less than an hour, he had lost his position as chief executive officer, lost control of V-Next, and lost the woman who had helped him conceal every weakness he had. "Clara, please do not leave." Julian's voice was hoarse. "I know I was wrong. I will fix everything. I will put your name back in the founding records. I will tell the press the technology belongs to you. You can have any position you want. Chairwoman of the board, chief executive officer, anything." Clara looked down at the hand clinging to her. For 10 years, she had waited to hear words like those. She had believed that once Julian became successful, he would remember the nights they had sat together on the laboratory floor, eating cold noodles and counting every dollar they needed for rent. But every time V-Next grew larger, Julian's memory became shorter. He remembered the lights. He forgot the person who had connected the wires behind the stage. Clara gently pulled her hand free. "Julian, I never needed a place beside you to prove who I was." Julian shook his head again and again. "I love you. Sasha was only a mistake. I got lost in the media attention, the pressure, and all the praise. Give me one chance to make things right." Clara looked directly into his eyes. "You did not beg when I was still wearing that old coat. You only started begging after you discovered that I owned Aegis Capital." Julian froze. Clara continued, her voice steady and cold. "I stood behind you to protect you. But you turned around and used the very documents I created to stab me. A broken rope cannot be repaired with promises made only after the money is gone." Arthur Pendleton stood a few steps away. He did not interfere. This was no longer a corporate takeover. This was the moment Clara had to close the door she had kept open for far too long. Julian looked at Arthur, then back at Clara. "I can start again. We can rebuild V-Next together." "No," Clara answered immediately. "We will restructure V-Next, but there will be no more stolen patents, fake media funds, or employees forced to kneel in order to satisfy their superiors. That company will no longer be built around your ego." Arthur handed Clara a folder. The first meeting of the new executive board would take place the following morning. Clara accepted the documents, turned away, and walked toward the elevator. Julian remained on his knees in the hallway. For the first time, there were no cameras waiting for him to stand back up. 3 years later, V-Next was no longer a symbol of Julian Vance. Under Clara's leadership, the corporation opened free energy research centers in several impoverished regions. Children learned how to assemble electrical circuits, build backup batteries, and develop solutions designed for the needs of their own communities. Lucas became the youngest engineer to manage one of those centers. The handkerchief Clara had given him on the night at the Zenith still remained inside his desk drawer. Julian disappeared from the events of high society. He sold his apartment, left Chicago, and found work as a field engineer on a project in a remote region. No secretary, no speechwriter. No one knew he had once been a chief executive officer. During the first few months, Julian remained angry. Then he grew quiet and began learning how to repair each piece of equipment with his own hands. Clara did not forgive him. He did not recover anything he had lost. But for the first time, he was doing work that required no applause. Betrayal and redemption does not always end with a reunion. Sometimes, true redemption begins when the person who caused the pain accepts that an apology cannot force someone else to return. Clara did not save Julian one final time. She saved the people his empire had once treated as invisible. Do you believe Clara made the right choice by walking away? Or did Julian deserve one final chance to prove he had changed? Share your opinion in the comments, because stories like this often reveal how differently people see betrayal, forgiveness, and second chances. If Clara's quiet strength and Julian's downfall kept you watching until the end, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more powerful family drama, hidden truths, and emotional reversals. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next story. Thank you for watching, and remember, the people we overlook may be the ones holding everything together.